Good afternoon, everyone, and warm welcome to today's event, Exploring Trade Diversification and How to Succeed in Asian Markets. It is a real pleasure to have you all with us. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to acknowledge that this is a slightly challenging time for many of us here in Sydney due to the latest developments around the pandemic. But this is clearly a safe and valuable way for all of us to get together and dive into a topic that is vital to our recovery as well as to our future. My name is Charlotta Oberg, or Lotta for short, and I am Associate Director of Capability Development here at Asialink Business. Before we begin today's proceedings, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians on all of the lands on which we meet virtually today. In my case, and for many of us, it is the Gadigal people of the Ora Nation whom we acknowledge, and I also pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with us today. A couple of notes on today's events. As you would have noticed when you joined us, this event is being recorded, and we asked for your permission to do so. While you can see me and the panelists today, we can't see you. We can, though, hear you through the Q&A button that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to submit questions there throughout, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible during the Q&A session towards the end. This Asialink Business event series, which we are doing in collaboration with the City of Sydney, aims to equip you, Sydney-based SMEs, with key insights and capabilities to explore business opportunities in Asia. And the topic today is, of course, key to that success. We're talking about diversification, and we will explore ways for your companies to diversify in the region. Capabilities you will need to do so well, and managing those challenges and opportunities on the way for small and medium-sized businesses. Our mission at Asialink is to drive creative engagement with Asia and to build a strong shared future between Australia and Asia. So we're very, very pleased to be partnering with the City of Sydney on this series. Just a quick note on what to expect from today. In a moment, we're going to have the privilege of having a welcome address from Counsellor Robert Koch. Then we will introduce your expert panel who are gathered here to share with you their experiences and expertise as they themselves live and breathe the diversification in their businesses in Asia. We will then deep dive into key factors for success with each one of them before coming back to you to respond to those questions that you probably would have submitted by then through the Q&A button. And the idea is you walk away with insights, with practical examples and ideas, and quite possibly some inspiration. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce Counsellor Robert Koch to provide the city's welcome address. Over to you.
Thank you, Lotta, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this forum. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of our land, and pay my respects to the elders. I also acknowledge the people of the 200 nationalities who live in our wonderfully diverse and multicultural city. So, firstly, I'd also like to thank Asialink for collaborating with us, with the city. And this is very opportune indeed, and also works in with our recovery from the pandemic and the city's recovery. So it is of utmost importance. We have had a very long association with Asialink Business, and I personally have also been had a long association with Asialink, being alumni and their leaders program back in 2003. So I'm very much privileged and also honored to be part of the Asialink family. Today we have a few guests, and they are experts in their fields, and I'm very happy and glad to that they're able to join us and impart their knowledge and expertise for our constituents here in the city. So I'd like to welcome them. Tegan, Addinsall, the Director of Reach Australia. Elaine, Starkey, CEO of Global Study Partners. James Wilson, Regional Director of Asia Pacific and Emerging Markets at Casella Wines. And Helen joining us from Seoul, from the Trade and Investment Commissions and Counsellor at the Austrade in Seoul. So welcome to our panelists, and I welcome Helen from Seoul. Indeed, a very wonderful city, which I've like to tell you that I'm also an honorary Seoul citizen. So this is the third of our Asia Link business events, which the City of Sydney partnered with Asia Link to present, with the aim of supporting Sydney's small and medium business enterprises to recover from the effects of the COVID pandemic and to maintain engagement with Asia, even while borders remain closed. And this is a very important aspect. And looking at how we do business and conduct our meetings and conduct engagement in this year, and then from experience from last year, this is of utmost importance. So our first event, we had three, and our first event focused on international education, while the second looked at e-commerce in Southeast Asia. So today's session encapsulates those themes with a broader lens, looking at the benefits of diversification in markets, supply chains, and approaches to market entry. So it will look at the core capabilities of Australian businesses that need to succeed in Asian markets. So the panel will provide insight into the education, technology, and food and beverage sectors, sharing their experiences that can help with recovery and growth from the pandemic. Sydney businesses need to be able to operate effectively in Asia, and our economy needs diversity in trade, maintaining existing markets, such as the China market and now the broader Asian and Southeast Asian markets, while exploring possibilities of new markets. But today's forum is designed to help you do that. So thank you for joining it. And once again, I'd like to thank our panelists, experts in their fields, for sharing their experiences and today their expertise, and leading, giving tips and so that we will learn from their experiences previously. So thank you, panelists. I wish everyone a fabulous event today, and a very fruitful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Koch. And we are very fortunate to have such Asia engaged and Asia capable leadership, I think, in our city. So thank you. And thank you also for introducing the panel. And now we're going to go to you, and we're going to allow everyone just to introduce themselves in a little bit more detail before we then deep dive with each one of you to really draw out what the Councillor Koch was talking about, those examples, the experiences, practical tips, great ideas. So let me begin, Tegan, with you. Tegan Addinsall, Director and Expert in Residence at Growth Accelerator Reach Australia. Tell us more about what you do.
Hi, so I'm here in a couple of capacities. Reach is part of Second Century Ventures, which is the second largest prop tech fund globally. So we work all over the globe, but in Australia and Southeast Asia, it's very much my job to accelerate companies and help those Aussie companies to move overseas. What was the key question, Loretta?
It was simply to introduce yourself a little bit more in detail. And I think you have, and I know that you're in the middle of all those interactions globally between Australia and Asia with those different hats. So yeah, thank you. We'll come back very shortly to learn more about your work, Tegan, and all the experiences you're getting also through those businesses that you grow with in Asia. And we're now going to hand over to Elaine Starkey. And as you were introduced before, you are the CEO and founder of Global Study Partners and EdTech. And I'm just going to preface it a little bit by saying that you provide a service that you call more than a game changer, a life changer. So hopefully I didn't take that out of your introduction, but I think, it's going to be intriguing for everyone to hear how you do that. So please let us know a little bit more. now.
I love that, Lotte. I forgot I wasn't even going to quote that today, but it is what we live by, actually. Look, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I'm the CEO and founder of Global Study Partners, and look, Global Study Partners is a two-sided marketplace for international student recruitment. It's a B2B platform, and we really empower students to study anywhere in the world through our platform by giving them unparalleled access to courses, to universities, to schools worldwide, and not just the education side, also the services they would need when they arrive in country. They may need an internship, they may need insurances and jobs and that type of thing. So it's a one-stop shop for international student recruitment, but it is a B2B platform. And look, up to about 18 months ago, we were so excited. You know, we've made loads of mistakes at the early stages building the business, which I'm really excited about sharing with everyone today. But then, you know, we got our first seed round of funding, a part of our Series A round, and we were about to close the rest of it, and COVID hit, and all of a sudden no students came into Australia and really anywhere in the world from any of the markets we were focusing on. So that really presented challenges, and I'm very happy to answer any questions on that today. But really we got through that, and we won a New South Wales Export Resilient Award recently. So I'm really thrilled with my team that we stayed on track, and business continuity and everything that was so important. But look, for those that wouldn't be aware of it, I'm sure most of you are, international education is our third largest exporter, and really up to 18 months ago was contributing $40 billion to the Australian economy. And it is really being hit badly. And I think one or two on the panel, James as well, is going to be hit really badly from wine exports as well. And we're in two industries that, wow, you know, it's had its real challenges. So I think our experience to overcome that was all about diversity, and hence the relevance of this today, and to be able to share our stories with everyone here, you know, because you know, building a global technology platform in multiple markets is challenging, but being hit with something that is so unprecedented, it has its own challenges as well, you know. So today's discussion is very relevant, and I'd be delighted to share my story and answer any questions and answer the challenges as well that we've experienced on the way, because I think you learn a lot more from your mistakes when building a business than your successes, and you have to take them on board and understand that every market isn't the same. The cultural differences is so not a cookie cutter business. It's, you know, you have to understand those nuances, and you don't really, you have that idealistic approach going in as a startup, as a founder, and you think, wow, this will be easy, and that's your first mistake. But anyway, so I'll hand it back to you, Lotte, because there's a few more to introduce, and happy to share those stories and lessons learned.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elaine. And I think we're smiling in recognition. You know, we're all looking forward to hearing more about that. Thank you. And thank you also, I was going to say in the middle of this, to those participants who are engaging with us in the chat. So we can hear you through that chat. So please continue to introduce yourselves and feel free to ask questions, and we'll come back. And I know Elaine will answer that question when it's her turn to talk. Now we're very excited to be introducing you, James Wilson, next. You're Regional Director of Asia Pacific and Emerging Markets for Casella Wines. And I think all of our participants will either have heard of you, heard of some of your brands, and certainly drank them. So over to you, James.
Cool, thanks Lotte, and hello everybody. Yeah, it's James Wilson here. I work for a company called Casella Family Brands. We're the largest privately owned wine company in Australia. So yes, I get to go out and sell wine for a living, which a lot of people is quite a nice job on many levels. We have one very famous brand called Yellowtail, which is available very widely all over the world and extensively through Asia. We also have a number of other wineries and facilities that we operate in Australia. Diversification has been key to our strategy in Asia, and sort of adapting during and hopefully fairly soon into a somewhat of a post-COVID world is critical to our success. We've had a lot of big changes in the world of wine export with various challenges recently, particularly in the Asia Pac region. So I look forward to discussing some of those and a little bit of some of the lessons and challenges we faced along the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. And it's, again, the generosity of the panel to come together in this group with all of you in the audience to share those mistakes and the challenges and how we overcome them. That's key, I think. Last but not least, then, I am delighted to welcome you, Helen. Helen O, you're Trade and Investment Commissioner and Counsellor Commercial at the embassy there, but at Austrade, joining us from Seoul in South Korea. Warm welcome, and tell us a bit more about what you do.
Thank you, Lotta, and thank you to AsiaLink and the City of Sydney for this opportunity to join this very distinguished panel. As Lotta said, I am located in Seoul in South Korea, looking after the agribusiness portfolio, both trade and investment. Before I was posted to Korea in January, I'm a proud Sydney-sider. I lived and grew up and worked in Sydney for most of my life, and also with AsiaLink, I was honoured to be named in one of the 40 under 40 most influential Asian Australian leaders last year. So, prosperity of Sydney economy and your connection with Asia is a vested interest of mine. Since my arrival in Korea, my team has been focused on supporting the rollout of the Australian government's trade diversification program called the Agribusiness Expansion Initiative, and we call it ABI for short. And this program is providing $72.7 million to allow a significant surge in support through our agencies, Austrade, Department of Foreign Affairs and Department of Agriculture. And this is directly targeted to assist Australian exporters like you to upscale and diversify your businesses across new international markets, including Korea. So very interested to engage in today's discussion and talk about how Austrade might be able to help.
Thank you so much, Helen, and I'm very, very pleased to have you here. Now, we are going to have a start to this discussion, which is really about exploring trade diversification. It's a very big topic, and we can talk about it in several ways, and we'll get to hear different slices of this, different experience of this with each of our valued panelists. So I would encourage our audience to keep those comments and questions coming and to listen out for what is useful and new for you, or what validates what you're thinking and doing. So we know that diversification itself is a multifaceted concept, and we might think of it in terms of disruptions and sort of the future proofing for some disruptions. It could be reactive, it can be proactive, it can be many things. And I know that our panelists will give us further ideas of how they see this. However, not a theoretical discussion leading into then what are we doing with diversification. So we are going to start off with a few comments from you, or quite a good chance to tap into your great experience, Tegan, Addinsall. And let's start there with that fundamental and important question. Simply, how do you see diversification? What does that mean in your field and experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, diversification, from my perspective and my experience, has been very much starting with awareness. I think there needs to be awareness of the opportunities. There needs to be a hunger, an interest, a curiosity for questioning what those opportunities are to make informed choices. A great example, I'm in prop tech, particularly interested in that area of tech. Many of the Aussie companies I'm talking to are talking about their expansion plans into the US. They talk about it's English speaking, it's easy, they've got some connections there, they understand the brands there. Now, it's not till I start talking about the amazing opportunities, for instance, in Philippines, where we're not just looking at building single buildings or, skyscrapers, we're looking at building whole cities and smart cities. So, understanding the breadth and depth of the opportunities that are available in Asia, which are, huge, as I'm sure everyone here will concur, is very much the first step in diversification, but very much has to be that awareness and that thinking. And that's what makes the diversification actually work.
That's a wonderful response. Thank you. And involving a practical example. And I guess for all of us here, all of you who are listening today, you might be thinking, yes, I'm curious. That's why I'm here. I'm keen to learn and would like to gain more awareness. There's so much opportunity. We know that. So where to start? I know there's $1 million question there for you, Tegan, and I'm going to have a few more of those coming. But just a few ideas from you, really. Where do you start? How do you get started?
Yeah, look, it's the first question that every founder or small business owner comes to me with. There's a couple of key things that you can do, and it is about building that awareness. One of the best things I love to see working for a VC is part of your investment slide deck. I love to see that you have a backup or a group of people, whether that be a customer panel or an expert panel, which covers different regions of your potential markets. There's nothing better than looking at a slide deck where you've got a series of 30 people that are experts, in Japan, China, Vietnam. You need people on your team. So a panel is a great way to start. Look, in terms of other things that you can do, there's amazing mentoring and there's amazing people that would love to be involved in your business. We're so lucky as Aussies that we've got advocates globally, and they just love jumping in. And so meeting them, interacting with them, and yes, it doesn't need to be face-to-face anymore. We can make a Zoom appointments or Messenger, or there's a bazillion different ways that we can communicate, but getting some advocates in the country in terms of mentors, or in terms of a panel or a group of people you can draw on their knowledge. Look, the other key thing that's worth mentioning is the Accelerator Programs, and the programs that are available to Aussie businesses in Asia and Asia Pacific are huge. And I have so many different programs writing to me to suggest businesses that they can invest their time in and bring into their country. A great example is the New World Group in China. Their portfolio is bigger than my left arm. It's huge. The scale is just astronomical. They have a specific innovation arm that are crying out for businesses and ideas about how they can do things better. In their program, 3-month program, which you don't have to pay for, they don't take equity. They're just looking for solutions to their problems. They help you package up their solution, and then they internally advocate for your solution so that their business can do things better. So, all throughout Asia Pacific, we're really lucky. There is so many people that are ready to advocate for you. But yeah, get in touch, reach out. There's bazillions of people like me that are talking to these people every day.
Yeah, thank you, Tegan. I think it whets the appetite for people. If that's the kinds of opportunities out there, that's already quite inspiring. So I guess when you then have uncovered opportunities, when you've gotten one step further, and I hear what you're saying about getting an understanding of those opportunities through people in Australia, people in Asia, diaspora, both ways. It's a point that I know we'll come back to. And I'm pretty sure that all of you in the audience would have thought about that too. So, and if you haven't, you should, but if you have already done that, that's fantastic. So it sounds to me like you have more of a systematic approach here, in your work. What do you do next? Like, what about choosing amongst opportunities? What are some examples there of dilemmas or, processes that one can apply?
Oh, gee. Well, there's the university lecture for me. It'll come out in a minute. But, I do have a specific process. Most growth specialists like myself do have their specific processes, but it's usually about the engagement and the team and the network. You know, your market evaluation, there's so many fantastic ways of doing that now that don't involve you taking a clipboard to your local train station. We have Google, we have all kinds of search engines and different search ways of searching in different countries. We can get an idea of if the market already exists. We can have an idea of if it's a market that we need to develop and how we would approach it. But it is very much, in my mind, you've got two ways of growth. You can grow through partnerships or you can grow direct through customers. If you go out directly to customers, that's a bit more of a slower way. And that's the way a lot of SMEs and founders first do it. What I encourage you to do is look at how you can bite off chunks of the market. Who can you partner with? Who can you make friends with? Who can you collaborate with? Whether that be another brand or a group that already has a group of your customers. There's also distribution options. Who can I partner with as a supplier within that company, country? So there's two ways of looking at biting off customer by customer, which often works in B2B, and if you've got some larger customers. But importantly, a great place to start is with major partnerships. There can be a big chunks of market share bitten off very quickly and very efficiently with the right connections and the right people on your team.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that, Tegan. And I know that we're going to come back to this with you, Elaine, who we're going to next. I just want to say thank you, for those, I guess, really good orientation responses for businesses looking to expand. And many of you online will be looking to expand with limited budget, as is the case at certain stages of expansion. So hopefully there you got something to start thinking on. And I know, Tegan, you work with, I think it's 65 startups that you've grown. So clearly a lot of experience there.
Yeah, actually it's 72 now.
Oh, 72. Yeah, it's happened. It's grown since we spoke last. Thank you so much again. And now over to you, Elaine. It's really thrilling to be delving into that business model that changes lives, not just being a game changer. I guess if we start just with what it is that you do, the business model that you employ, and the role that you play in the international education sector.
Fantastic. Look, Global Study Partners, it's our technology solution enables international student recruitment. And it was when I started on this journey, I suppose in 2014, I hopped on a plane to Nepal thinking I knew a lot more than I did, as our very first proof of concept. It was wow, it was like mind-shattering for me. It was very culturally different, and I learned there with the wrong business model. We were going B2C, and we were going very high-tech solution, and realized that most of the channel partners we wanted to work with were very low tech. Actually, they were manual, they were paper-based, fragmented. I saw the opportunity, which was fantastic. 80% of students still come through what we call education agents or intermediaries to place students, but many of them were contracted one or two universities. So what would happen is a student would walk into their local education agent who they saw as a trusted advisor. And a lot of the time they were given very biased information based on what university they worked with. So I met students and thousands of students that, thought they were going to Sydney and they ended up going someplace else, or and they were given the wrong information, the wrong college, the wrong course. But I also saw the importance of this channel. It's so important because parents and families were selling homes and lands, making huge sacrifices to send their students overseas. So they needed to get the right information, the right access. So rather than compete with them, we came back, we changed our whole model, and we built a B2B platform to empower this channel and help them grow. And it has been really successful. We now have over, I think, 1,500 contracted channel partners in 14 countries overseas. We're contracted with over 560 university and college providers in multiple destinations. But what you really need to do is first proof up one market first, you know, so build your supply and demand, do a proof of concept, it works, and then expand to other markets. But we also wanted to stay global from day one. So we expanded quite quickly, which in itself had a lot of challenges. Sorry, a lot.
You go ahead. Yeah. No, thank you so much, Elaine. I mean, that's an impressive, story of success already. I guess what we would like to delve into is it's the expansion journey that you had. Where you went. You mentioned being global from the start, but where you started, whether you used any accelerator programs that you could draw on. So please share with us how it was from the beginning, and then we'll follow you in your journey.
We did quite a few, actually. We did the KPMG Elevate 61 program, which was one program. I actually had a lot of contacts built up over the years in Austrade, and I tapped into the Austrade support. They set up meetings for us. They helped us with our market entry strategy. They were fantastic, actually, particularly in a few markets. We tapped into the EMDG and all of these support mechanisms that help you actually build and grow your business. And then we had a stint in the landing pad in Singapore, which actually kind of started our expansion into the ASEAN region. And from there, we opened our Vietnam, we opened Philippines and multiple other markets from there. We learned an awful lot in building that, actually, and we then started diversifying from sending everyone to Australia as well into other markets. So the first couple of years was, ASEAN region and South Asia into Australia. And now we're sending students into Ireland and UK, into Canada, US. We haven't gone into China yet. And there was a couple of reasons why we didn't go into China. One, to be honest, it was just we didn't have the right partner. We didn't have enough funding. We felt we went in, did a trial. We didn't have enough funding in place. And we felt you need a partner. You need your assets built behind the firewall there. And you need the right partners really to take you into a market that isn't English speaking. So it had a lot of challenges. But look, I'm meeting today about our Chinese expansion now. And we are certainly looking at going into China. So we're very excited about that as well.
Oh, that's great to hear, Elaine. And I think the expansion into Vietnam from the landing pad, we're very interesting to hear about why you chose Vietnam and how it helped develop your business. Why was it a destination of choice?
Yeah, look, Vietnam had all the right substance for an emerging market. It was fast growing, a growing middle class. To give you an example, I think it had grown from 12 million to over 33 million and 33% in a very short space of time. So we knew that it was a very strong market. It had very strong ties as well with Australia. And the Vietnamese students, they really value education as well. So it was an obvious market for us to go into. And we had good relationships with the Austrade personnel in Vietnam who set up, they did the full itinerary for us. They set up our meetings. They even introduced us to our 2 founding staff that, have built our operation. And from Vietnam, we really slingshot into the other areas in Asia. And our director in Vietnam now is managing our Philippines operation. And recently we have expanded to Laos and Cambodia and Myanmar and placed our first students from all of those markets. And even Turkey, that's not that relevant for here, but it just shows the diversity of the model. So certainly we did a lot of research into the Vietnamese market. We did a lot of all our digital marketing had very much Vietnamese content as well. That, you have to, our platform remained in English because it's about studying overseas, and we expect our partners to be able to, to actually work the platform in English. But in saying that, all of the communication, you have to look at targeting parents. They're the ones that make the decisions an awful lot of the time. A lot of them don't speak English. So all our social media was always built in Vietnamese. And that actually resonated very well. And I think that's the reason for our success in Vietnam. It has been our fastest growing market in the region and in the whole business.
That's fantastic to hear. And that localization, I think, is something people are very curious about. Yeah. So would you say you did that more in detail? What was the support that you drew on in order to be able to do that? Is it localization, local talent? Austrade?
Yes, it's certainly local talent. I mean, the local talent we have on the ground there. We have 2 offices in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, and we have, I think, 18 full-time people working there, and they're all Vietnamese, and we have Vietnamese, Australian, and they're local staff, but very experienced. So I think it's important that you employ people that really know the industry if you're going into the market and have a proven track record. Because like my experience was, you can get fantastic salespeople in countries, but unless they actually know your industry, they can fail, So we had an amazing team there. And they were experienced from an institution point of view, and experienced from an agency point of view, the recruitment, and experienced in marketing. So all those 3 combinations resulted in the success we got, but it doesn't happen overnight. And I think it's all down to engagement. Technology is fantastic, but giving students the right information is a very high touch solution, and technology will never replace that. So ours is very much a hybrid model where we pride ourselves on being really high touch and getting the right outcomes for the student. And we monitor those outcomes through the platform as well.
Fascinating. Thank you, Elaine. That's great. We have a couple of questions coming through, and some of them, it makes sense to ask a little bit more right away, and we may be able to come back to them later on as well. But one of them was really around expanding into Singapore, and just even the steps you took. I think you described the broad brushstrokes, but if you go backwards to when you started out and you're looking ahead and you're trying to explore what Tegan, you were talking about, what are the opportunities? How was it that you came upon that particular opportunity to expand with Singapore as a base at the start there?
Yeah, I suppose it was ongoing engagement with Austrade and their staff, and looking at the market entry strategies. And I had already in my previous life had been a publisher, and I published the Australian International Education and Training Guide, which Austrade had distributed through different countries. But I felt that Singapore was a gateway to the countries that we wanted to target. And even though it wasn't really, it's not a huge market for us, it was a very important base. So we could base ourselves there and fly in and out for investment meetings, for meetings in different countries. And it was a fantastic base. And that program, it's just 3 months based in an incubator, but you learn a lot from your cohort. We signed agreements actually that are very valuable now with COVID. You needed that diversity and agreements for even Australian institutions that have campuses in Singapore. And through that, we got introduced to a few universities that have campuses in Vietnam. And like we have an agreement, say, with RMIT in Australia at the moment. When students can't fly into Australia, they can actually start their course in Vietnam, and they can actually, so that actually was a really fantastic opportunity that was introduced from a lot of our contacts in Singapore and our stint in the landing pad there in Singapore. So I'd say, it's available through the Austrade websites. Get onto the Austrade website, you learn a bit more about the landing pad, because there's one in Tel Aviv and there's one in, I think, in Silicon Valley as well. There's a couple now globally, but as a startup, I'd say jump on. It's free. It's the mentoring is free, and you can't underestimate the value of that mentoring while you're there and you're an early stage company.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Elaine. And I know we're going to come to Helen there at the end, so we can hear more about, the steps to take, but that's fantastic. Thank you again. I do have one last question for you, Elaine, and it is around the partnerships, which I wanted to pick up on, which Tegan, you also started us off on. And you have at Global Study Partners, you have a particular model there for your marketplace, and clearly very strong partnerships that you talked about, the engagement being key. Could you tell us more about, or maybe even provide some advice for our audience here on how to develop these critical partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's all hard work, really, and research. You have to research first. And if you can get soft and warm introductions, is fantastic to these partnerships. And like our first introductions were through a lot of the government initiatives that we were working on, and we got some soft introductions. And I think you can't underestimate the value of having the Australian government's support and introduction going into your market. I mean, it's not as important in Australia, but it's very important overseas. It sets you aside from other companies that won't have that, And really it's just hard work, making sure you understand who you're targeting, having your local people, being able to contact them, get in front of them, doing group webinars, doing seminars, engaging and being very transparent, you know. So I think if we started here, we wanted to build our supply side first. You know, as an aggregator, I think you can't go out, it's like a hotels.com, you can't go out with a 1-star hotel and a 5-star hotel. You have to have a range of 5 to 1 star, not just hotels and motels. You have to have everything in between. And we had to do the same with universities, vocational colleges, English language and schools. Now that took actually 3 years to build before we placed 1 student. So you're not monetizing your model, but it's really important because it positions you when you go out then to drive the demand side, that you actually have a compelling offering for your market. You know, so everyone's market is different, and that's how it worked for us. But I'm happy to answer any other detailed questions, or for you to share my contact details if anyone wants any more knowledge on that.
Thank you. There are some questions coming in. I'm saving them a little bit for Q&A. So please, if you put your question in, know that we have plans to answer that. But that is great. Thank you, Elaine. I hear about the diversification among the tiers of suppliers, or sorry, partners as well. So thanks for that. It's very interesting and inspirational. And the energy comes through loud and clear as well. And now we're going to change industry, and we're going to come over to you, James Wilson from Casella Family Brands. And I guess, James, your sector is often now front and center in diversification discussions. Casella Wines, we know, has been able to differentiate itself from other companies by curating this diverse strategic profile, it seems to us, from the start. So I guess I wanted to invite you to just talk us through that. Like, how has your organization, your company gone about this in the past, and where are you at now?
Yeah, thanks, Lotta. I think what is very interesting for us is that we were a brand that really exploded in the early 2000s, and was really one of the sort of really big success stories in wine ever. But diversification and then what to do next. The brand was launched in 2001, so this year is actually 20 years old. So even though it still feels young and fresh to us, we're actually having a generational shift. So having that differentiation early was really, really critical, because even then the wine category was incredibly saturated. So I think, you know, the amazing thing that the owner of our company did was find these couple of touch points, or blue ocean, if anyone's ever looked at that's marketing strategy book, and found these couple of touch points that were super important, and that's understanding the market that you're going into, plus a bit of good timing and luck. So the timing and luck was we launched in 2001, and the Sydney Olympics had just happened. So Australia was very in people's minds. It was a very attractive concept at the time. But what the key thing that the founder of our company, John Casella, actually managed to tap into was this concept that wine was still deemed quite a complicated, quite an intimidating, and a little bit of an uncomfortable thing for a lot of people. So he said, how can we unlock that? So the two things, the main ways were to create a taste of product that was really, really forward, easy to get along with, and just super friendly for everyone, but also to create a brand that totally removed a lot of that kind of what we'd say is almost like sort of snobbery or intimidating factor. This was like, we don't care if you match the red wine with meat. We don't care what you do. You just come and drink it. We're not going to judge you. We're super friendly. And then it also happened to be packaging that had a kangaroo on it that was bright and it was colourful. So what happened is it created this kind of groundswell of recommendation amongst people. And those things, amazingly, hadn't really been done at the time. So that caused a significant kind of word of mouth kind of revolution early on, and the brand grew incredibly quickly. So, but what was interesting is that we were very over-indexed on the USA. So when I joined the company, you know, I think 85% of our business is in the USA. So we're talking about diversification today. We've had to work very, very hard to expand our brand into other markets. And I'm happy to say today, our spread of business is, I would say, a lot more balanced. And that's obviously, I think, important, because as we've seen in Asia, not all markets are going to always be performing, and the challenges that we're having in China means that it's very important to have an offset of, good business across a number of different markets. That all takes a long time to build up. And then probably another really interesting thing is 20 years on, we do market research now, and we get, particularly younger people and millennials or, Gen Zs, and they go, we do the study, the research groups, and they go, oh, yellowtail, oh, that's what my mum drinks. I'm not going to drink that. When you work for the company, you still think it's this great fresh brand, but actually the people speak sometimes. So the question is, how do you stay relevant now? How do we keep our core consumers happy, but how do we make the brand attractive and interesting to new consumers? And I suppose the way we do, one of the key things we do there is innovation, and particularly, product innovation is very important to our business. And I think when you look at some of the meta trends or consumer trends that have taken place over the last few years, I think a number of those have been accelerated during the COVID period. It's amazing how much has kind of changed and how people's sort of mindsets have shifted on a lot of different areas. And that probably transcends our category. It goes through, the way people think about life, So if I just touch on one, probably a consumer trend that we've tapped into is this concept of health and wellness, or better for you. People are choosing not to drink so much alcohol. They're looking for products that are better for them. So, we've thought about that, and that also very much aligns with that younger consumer that we're looking to bring in to our brand, which is what we need to sustain the brand and hopefully still be here talking in 20 years time, another 20 years time. So we've just released, simple example. We've just rolled out a range of wines called Pure Bright, 25% less alcohol, beautiful packaging, has allowed us to freshen up our conversations with the trade gatekeepers and be able to target a new group of consumers, specifically target them with something that we know is kind of important to them now. So we're bringing in the new consumers and also hopefully not keeping our existing consumer groups as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. And I hear that, in your stories too, I hear that you're finding those opportunities throughout. And it's particularly interesting to think about that early example of, Sydney or Australia after the Olympics. We often talk in Asia engagement about harnessing the soft power.
Yes.
The power to influence, the power of attraction in a way on a national sense. And I can hear that that's something that you were able to tap into. So you could call it luck in terms of timing, but you definitely made your luck with that as well. That's fascinating. We do have a question here about a challenge. So some of the questions, I think they fit straight into what we're thinking we might talk about. And Kim McDonald, thank you so much for sending through some questions there. She's asking you, James, how are you dealing with IP protection for your brand and product?
Yeah, I know, Lotta, we were going to get to the always important advice section at the end of, what to think about. And I have to say, some of the challenges that we have had, and I would say this is something that you hear in all these webinars, but I think we all say it, and we say it because it is very important, and that is IP and trademark protection is really, really important, particularly when you're looking to enter new markets or expand and diversify into markets. To arrive there and go, oh my God, we can't sell our brand with our trademark that we use everywhere else. So I think, we've been certainly very, very, I would say, serious about that from the get-go, and haven't run into, not on our main Yellowtail brand, but we've seen definitely cases of other brands that have got into a lot of trouble without having their IP protected. So it is worth the investment, even if you're quite small. I think as soon as you think that international or your strategy is to diversify and expand, you need to make sure that you've got that back end locked up.
Thank you so much, James. And I know we have that at the end. We're intending to come back with just a couple of pieces of advice for a broad audience, which are all, of course, very diverse in yourselves. But I think that might come back as well. So thanks, James. Now, I'm going to go more on the sort of personal level for all of us in here who are working to understand different markets. And we know from Asia Business, from our research and studies that we've done, that in terms of Asia capability, it's important to know about the market. And in the sense of Asia capability, when people look at the markets, we're very focused on the facts and the stats that we need to know about, very important. But it's also important to understand that there's a different way of thinking, a different way of doing business. And I guess all that adds up to a broader range of Asia capabilities. So with that all preamble, I wanted to then ask you, James, because I know that you have, as I think everyone here has, intentionally invested and worked on your own Asia capabilities. What do you see as critical to the success to understand and navigate those new markets?
Yes, I think it is that taking that time to really try and get as much information as you can and really get a feel for the markets that you're looking to get involved with. I do need to declare now I am a recent cohort of the Agribusiness program as well, and I have to say, from a sort of, certainly for my day job, that had been incredibly useful for me and allowed me to, I'd say, really, I thought I knew Asia pretty well, but it was a huge overlay. So I think anything you can do there, and I think that probably dovetails into, as Tegan said, there are a huge amount of very cost-effective support and people out there who really do want to help, whether that be government through Austrade or some of the work that Helen does, through into AsiaLink in the wine business. We have Wine Australia. We have down to even regional bodies, like Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, and all of whom have programs, and often many of which are free or very, very, very cost effective. So I would always advocate to lean as much as you can on the information that is available. What's interesting, again, this goes back to the fact that we started exporting a while ago to today. The importance of partnership is absolutely still, I think, incredibly strong. But I also think now, if we were launching our brand now, probably to what Tegan said, we used to be in our business that you would find a good importer, you would sell to them, and then you would sell out to the market. But I think now the diversity and breadth of channels that you can actually approach, you can probably get to the consumer, quite comfortably now in so many different ways. The growth of e-commerce in Asia is huge. It allows you to tell your story directly to a consumer, and it may be a cost-effective way. So you don't have to potentially go down this traditional method. And probably the other thing I think we would have done if we would be launching today is probably set up more particular presences in market. I think when you look at Asia, if you can show your commitment to a country by actually going, we're going to put down our roots here, we're going to actually open an office, we're going to show commitment, we're going to be on the ground. It's different to me flying in and flying out. That's all nice. I can go and pay respects, but I think being there day to day, if your business, once it gets to that scale, the phase 2 of the key markets you're looking to target, I think that sends a really strong message.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. That's great. I think we also heard that, from Elaine, that it is the people and the relationships that you've got to harness as well. There's a detailed question there that I think we can do right away from Harry Gu. Thank you so much. The question there for you, James, do you have wine storage in your targeted overseas countries? So that matches that business model piece.
Do we keep our own wine? Do we warehouse? No, so this probably gets back to this, this sort of how we've set up our business has been quite traditional in that we work with only exclusive importers in all of these markets, and that there is a lot to like about that model. So to answer his question, no, we don't. We actually just work with the importer and they store. We do have some direct to retail arrangements where we ship directly into the warehouse of the retailer, which also is another way to do it. But certainly for some of the more complex markets like China, where you might have a large number of different customers, because an individual importer might not be the answer, I definitely know a few industry colleagues and other companies in the industry do set up a warehousing type operation where they can maintain their stock and then be able to spin that out to a number of different customers. But for us, we work with a long-term group of customers that hold the stock on our behalf.
Fantastic, James. And I think that is a good one to be continued as well, I think, offline there with you and Harry. So thanks for that. My last question to you is a little bit around the difference between the markets that are mature and the markets that are developing. So what are the differences that you found between those mature markets like Japan and developing ones?
Yeah, look, I think, this has been a really interesting one. I think when we go in and we look to, how we started in Asia, we did start with the more what we call the traditional wine markets of Asia. And today we sell pretty much, across the board. There's not many countries in Asia that we don't sell to. So I think if you look at that group of markets, everyone, this old mistake of going, looking at Asia as one blob, it is just not. It's such a complicated, and very different set of countries. And for us, the difference there, a lot of that revolves around the kind of maturity of the market. Wine is still a pretty new category in a lot of these markets. So when we look at these less mature markets, we really need to tailor our approach somewhat to dealing with, where the consumers are at, what they're kind of looking for versus a more mature market, like a Japan, or even, back into our traditional Western markets like our home market in Australia. So for us personally, what we just a couple of things, what we find with consumers in these more developing markets is they are still less sure about wine. Wine is kind of still an aspirational product. They might be drinking beer and local, quite cheap spirits, but they probably, as the affluence and their become more middle class, they think wine is a kind of, it's something to aspire to. So, but they're not confident about their decisions. So what we do with our brand is we try and make sure that we make our brand easy to approach, and we give them a nice reassurance that it's a brand that they can trust in order to be able to get them to try it. We know the quality of our wine is really, really strong. We know that once they try it once, we're pretty sure that they'll go back. But giving that reassurance and creating simple messaging that's not too complicated. In a more mature market, we can probably talk more about the kind of wine, the winey kind of elements, and make it more, detailed. But we like to keep it much more simple, and you can trust us. And then we use a quite simple sort of brand positioning, which is, tastes like happy. So, everyone can kind of understand that. We hope that that's a good pathway as we look to recruit new users.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you, James.
Drinkers, users sounds terrible. Sorry, drinkers. We're talking about wine. It's a lovely product.
And we appreciate the knowledge that you display there about how people think about your market from their perspective, and the investment that you've made to understand that really fully. So thank you so much for that. There are many questions there in the chat that we can come back to as well after when we talk about Q&A, and we'll go to that in about 15 minutes. So we'll come back to all of your questions. Please keep them coming. And now we know that there are people already who are very keen to get your email address, Helen, because, I think everyone's very inspired to hear what kinds of connections they can make with you at Austrade. But perhaps we could just start off a little bit more general before we get to the specifics. Could you tell us a little bit more about why diversification is important from your perspective, and also a little bit touch on what the China Plus strategy incorporates from your end?
Yeah, thanks, Lotta. And I've been madly writing from learning from Tegan and Elaine and James. So thank you for this opportunity. Starting with why it's important. Trade from Australia's economic perspective plays a critical role in supporting our jobs. So 1 in 5 jobs in Australia are supported by exporting businesses. So businesses that are owned by Tegan and Elaine and James and like the participants. And at this time, I know that our exporters are facing more difficult set of circumstances with, geopolitical and economic tensions in the region, as well as dealing with the impact of COVID. And at this time, the Australian government wants to ensure that our businesses have access to particular, right services and information to continue growing and exporting to overseas markets. And also noting that, as has become obvious in previous remarks, that domestic and overseas markets don't sit still. So it is important for the government, Australian government and industry to work together so we can stay agile and take up new opportunities and mitigate various business risks as they come up, known knowns and unknown. knowns and unknowns. Moving forward to what it incorporates, our talk in terms of the agribusiness expansion initiative I touched on earlier. So the $72.7 million is being spent on scaling up export services to Australia and overseas markets to help over 2,000 Australian agri-food exporters expand their international markets. We have also established an online self-serve portal at export.business.gov.au, which is available 24/7, and the data that's generated when you put in your business type and what you would like to do and the markets you would like to explore, those data are based on our Border Force collection. And so it will show you markets that are already doing well in your product category, so that you know there's an established sort of importer network, retailer network, so you can stay in touch with them. We're also providing match grants for government and industry associations to work together on market expansion programs. And to James's point earlier, for wine, we're working very closely with Wine Australia to support a wide array of exporters. And if you haven't already been in touch with your industry chambers, industry associations, please do so, because Austrade is working closely with all these peak bodies to help the industry as a collective, so we can provide more transparent and equitable services. We're also hiring additional technical experts onshore and also in market to open new market access. And we're also delivering a number of sector-specific and market-specific information sessions and briefings to keep you updated on, developing COVID situations and different market access information. Agribusiness expansion initiative is one example of the Australian government working closely with the industry to help you diversify your markets, but there are many other examples, as we've heard earlier, that are available for you as well.
Thank you. So I guess it's hard when you're speaking to a diverse audience to say where should you exactly go to get that next step, engaging with Austrade. But it sounds to me like, it's about, going on your webpage, learning what's available. And of course, you said also to connect with the industry associations and chambers. I do know that there's several people who are interested in connecting with you. Is that fine too, as a first step?
Yes, for trade work, because we've been getting so many inquiries for the Korean market as well as Northeast Asia in general, we Austrade onshore officers are coordinating and qualifying those leads. And so if you know a Austrade global engagement manager or trade starter to begin with, the first step would be to get in touch with them or get in touch with us through Austrade website. That way, our onshore colleagues will be able to sit down with you, understand your export needs, and come up with a coordinated action plan to reach out to different markets in the most efficient manner, rather than doing a piecemeal work here and there. So I would encourage you to get in touch with our onshore colleagues, and then Korea as a market will be able to come into the bigger piece of work and help you be connected to the right people in market.
Thank you, Helen. That's perfect. Now, you mentioned a lot of interest, of course, for South Korea from SMEs. So let's have a look at that. What type of SMEs would benefit from doing business with you there, South Korea?
Yeah, so as touched on by all of the panelists before, Korea is a market that's very relationship focused. So if you're a business that is committed to the Asian market long term, if you have a product that is different to what's already in market, and for example, Koreans are very tech savvy. About 95% of the Korean market is already connected to smartphones, pretty much embedded to their hands. And so if you have a product that is new, Instagrammable, and already doing good business in Australia, you'd be perfect for the Korean market. Also, I know we'll get to this a little bit later as well, but as Tegan touched on, best thing about living in Sydney is that you have the world at your feet. And so, if you want to test market demand in Korea, for example, I would encourage you to test your product with the Korean Australian community in Sydney to understand their sort of take on your product, what their user experience is like. And if they really like your product, they will leave a review or comments on these Naver website search engine or cross-border community blogs. And Korean importers and consumers are paying close attention to this data. So, if you generate all these verification review points, your market entry when you actually physically come into the market will be much easier. So if you are ready to do those things, you'll be perfect for the Korean market. In terms of some of the things that James touched on earlier in terms of IP as well, if you're a company that is willing to talk to the Korean local partners or East Asian local partners in general and be willing to negotiate and come to a middle point in terms of product adjustments, labeling adjustments, pricing adjustments, I think, yeah, you'd be perfect for the Korean market.
Fabulous. Thank you, Helen. Looking then again at the Korea market, perhaps the markets also around you in the East Asian markets, I think there's two pieces to it. And one is the cultural side, what might be different. And then there's a whole context side of society, how it works, the economy, etc. So I was going to start there on the cultural side. What are the cultural considerations? We've all mentioned relationship building, and thank you again, Dr. Anne-Marie Moody, for asking the question, which I think we'll finish on as well, because it's such a big one. But what's different, do you find, in how relationships are built in, if we start with South Korea? What other differences do you notice? And maybe that's also a heads up for the businesses here online about what to think about, what to be aware of.
Yeah, so I guess one point to start on is the relationships are built on the broader context of history and the different types of communities that are embedded in the broader culture. And those things shape consumer preferences and consumer behaviours. In terms of what's different about Korean culture and how to really tap into this market and also the broader East Asian market, I would come back to the point of understanding contracts differently. So when Australians enter into contract, it's very clear. There are, maybe 1,000 pages of different terms and clauses. You almost expect that things will go wrong and you anticipate and mitigate those risks. I think Korean and also East Asian market in general, I think there's a more positive outlook on business relationships. So contracts might be only 2 pages long, and it just says that, this business and this business will enter into a commercial agreement and we'll distribute to, for example, Hyundai department store, and that's it. And this contract from a Korean or East Asian perspective is seen to be an honourable system. So even if things go wrong, the proponents are expected to hold up their honour and meet what you agree to verbally. This might be very different to how Western businesses go about contracting and do distribution agreements. And that comes from, for Korea, for example, a war-torn country, only 60 years ago, not many people were literate, and so a lot of businesses were done on verbal grounds. And so those things continue based on history, and those things continue in big contracts here as well. So I think that's one particular cultural consideration I would impart on our participants today.
So much, Helen, and that's very helpful, I think. And I like how you tie that back into what people have experienced, the history and the society and how society is developed. So that's very useful, I think, as a way of thinking. And finally, I think on the topic of opportunity, there's so much of it, but we're not the only ones who are very interested in it here in Australia. So knowing that there is a whole lot of competition, it would be interesting to hear from you what you are seeing in the market, who is there physically or virtually, and if you have any advice for our SMEs here online today about how they could potentially distinguish themselves from foreign competitors.
Yeah, I mean, Korea and East Asia in general, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, very crowded market in terms of foreign businesses. in terms of how to stand out amongst them, as James said before, and also Elaine touched on, marketing and advertising in local language, and understanding what your target audience wants to hear in those local languages is just so important. And understand and spending time to understand the market structure. For example, for James, in wine industry here, there's a layer of players that you need to get in contact with and express your long-term commitment. If you can do that and approach those relationships from a non-transactional perspective, I think you would stand out, because a lot of the European and American companies come in and they're just after that next sales, and that's it. So if Australian businesses come in really with a long-term perspective of doing business with Korea, understanding the history, therefore really catering the message in Korean, reaching into what the Korean values are, I think we will stand out amongst the many European and American and other businesses that are just in it for the next transaction.
Fantastic, Helen. And potentially also back to the comments that we heard throughout about learning on the ground here in Australia. For those of us who are here with of course, there's the diaspora, there are the multicultural communities, there are many opportunities, really. Back to Tegan's good point about building up a group of advisors. So thank you so much again, Helen, for that overview. And what we'd like to do now is have more of a flowing conversation across the panel around your questions. So what I'll do is I'll take a couple of them. Thanks so much for submitting them. And then I'll invite one of us to answer that question. And we'll see if someone else would like to comment as well. So now, if you've been sitting on a question thinking, is this going to get answered? And it wasn't, please go ahead and submit that question. I might start with quite a specific one there. Thank you, Tansin Press, who has asked us a question from your organization, and it's for James, I think. James, how have you been managing impacts on your cash flow and foreign exchange risk management due to Chinese tariffs imposed on Australian wine exports?
Ouch. Okay. Yes, that is the big question. And yes, that is really the elephant in the room of recent times. So look, I think there is no doubt that the flow-on effect from the current challenges in China are going to be significant for the Australian wine industry. And I think probably this gets back to really what the core discussion point here, which is about diversification. It just shows the absolute crucial importance of that. We've worked very, very hard to develop markets, not only like China over many years, but throughout the rest of Asia. So we know that business is never certain. We know that change is always going to happen. So what we've tried to do is just make sure that we have a good enough spread of business that when one market something unexpected happens, like it's happened in China, that we do have the ability to be able to still manage and be able to maybe shift some of our efforts across to other markets. And pleasingly, we've got Helen on this call because, for example, the Korean market's in the middle of a mini wine boom at the moment, certainly through the COVID period, and a couple of other markets in Asia have been growing very, very strongly. So we've really doubled down our efforts there. And we have seen some businesses that have been really had a huge amount of their eggs in one basket, being China. And I think for those businesses, that was fantastic, but it would be harder. It would be harder for them because now to try and suddenly settle those things up, as we know in Asia, everything takes time, or it does globally, but particularly in Asia, it takes time to build those relationships. So I would encourage, even if one market is going exceptionally well, always to be looking to what is next and be able to do that diversification.
Thank you very much, James. I guess that the answer to that question was to be prepared with diversification rather than to react. Though I guess it's very difficult for all of us. The disruptions are, happening, change is happening, and it's very hard to predict what comes next. So I'm going to actually go over to you, Elaine, because I know that you mentioned that, you were thinking global from the start. I guess what's the key to that? Like, first of all, how did you know to do that? And what are some of the steps you took to support yourself in thinking globally?
I suppose look, I realized that the student market, I mean, they're very sophisticated with accessing information, and, you know, it wasn't going to be long, up to a few years ago, a student would know, I want to go to Australia to study. And now COVID is a real example. A lot of students that were going to go to Australia are looking at other markets, but students are so empowered with information now. We had to be able to offer multiple destination study markets. And we also wanted to diversify and offer multiple source markets. If one market dropped, we found like I think in India about 10 years ago, the market dropped significantly. China has also had their ups and downs. So you can't really depend on one market. And it's really important there to diversify in that area. So like, and that's why we decided, look, global from the start, it has to be a global platform, but it's easier said than done. You know, the challenge is then, you know, it's practical challenges. You, like in Nepal, for example, you can't own more than 50% of a company. So you have to find, so that's a structural thing. To be honest, that was an absolute nightmare at the start, you know, just trying to overcome that. In India, the government brought in an Indian GST 18%. So then do you invoice out of India? Do you not? Or, you know, like there's all of these little challenges that aren't actually little challenges. They're very big challenges for small businesses understanding new markets, because in Vietnam, is it going to be a rep office? Is it going to be a satellite office? How do you structure these things? And I don't think there's enough advice for small companies on understanding that at the outset and planning a business that you can be global from day one. If you put the right structure in place at the early stages. You know, you're so busy running around trying to get your sales on the board, trying to do a proof of concept. But I think the practical help and advice on a structure is so important. And that's where we've mentioned it already, and James and Helen and everyone, and Tegan has mentioned the importance of the IP and having and understanding, really having the right advisory board of directors that can give you, like we've one lawyer in our board who's this expert in IP. You know, it's good if you have somebody, if you want to go for a listing longer term, that has that experience to take you to an IPO as well. You know, all those things, because you're not going to be an expert yourself. And very key is having somebody that's an expert in your industry as well, you know, and then understanding all your various markets as well. You know.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elaine. And I note that, you know, this is a constant thing that you're not done with, that the challenges just keep on coming when you're expanding. And I noticed also that there was a question on a live stream, thank you very much, around, you know, expanding into Bangladesh. And you said, oh, yes, we just opened our Bangladesh office. So clearly you find new ways to continue to expand continuously.
Look, in the last 6 months, we've opened Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Brazil, actually. So we stuck to our plan. Our continuity plan was, let's stick to it. And we were so glad we did, actually, because we wouldn't have secured the balance of the funding had we not shown. We had to say, look, we can't show real strong growth in revenue, which we thought we would have, you know, because students weren't flying. So we sat around as a team of executives and the whole company, really, how can we make our business in a better position to come out of this dilemma? So we thought, well, we'll continue with our market expansions, understand the markets better, open new markets, sign up new partners, get them all trained. We set up things like GSP chat space and talk space, which were really rooms for our university partners to talk to our recruitment partners, ongoing digital engagement, so that coming out of this, we will be in a much stronger position globally. And I think that was really important. Look, I would love to, I saw that note from the Consulate General in Bangladesh. I'd love to connect, because we have a small office, we have 2 people there. We'd love to expand there. And we haven't really gone on the ground to any contacts there to help us do that. So certainly we'll share my email here, and anyone else here that's asking questions that would like advice, any startups that would like advice, believe me, we've gone through it all. So reach out. I'd be more than happy to help.
That's great. Thank you, Elaine, for not just answering the question, but showing us also how it's done, building relationships virtually with the Consul General of Bangladesh right now. So thank you to the Consul General as well as to Elaine for doing that and for showing how that's done. And I guess it leads us to a very, very big question that we got there from Dr. Anne-Marie Moody, and that I would like to hear from all panelists on, but I'm going to start with you, Tegan. And it is that $1 million question. That's good. We've got to build relationships. You gave us an idea in the beginning of creating that, committee or board around you of advisors. But now, if we think about it in that virtual sense, we all sit here wherever we are, and for some of us, it's quite difficult to move around even locally. So then we have that trying to connect across borders, across cultures. So Tegan, what have you seen among the 72 small businesses that you worked with and in your own work has worked really well when it comes to developing relationships virtually? I invite you to come off mute.
Look, it's like many things in business. There's no magic or silver bullet. It is a case of hitting the virtual pavement, and in this case, for us, one of our main tools is LinkedIn. And I know that's not what people want to hear, but I spend my 2 hours on LinkedIn at least every week, making connections, introducing myself to new people, researching companies that I'd like to partner with, going through messaging multiple people, looking at how we're connected. So there's this wonderful directory that's there for us to use. The problem is, so are hundreds and thousands of other people. So the shortcut of that is to work with accelerators like myself. We have Reach Australia and many accelerators and incubators all work quite similar. They have a pool of people that they'll connect you with. And I'm in a VC, which is of course very financially motivated, but there is the Austrades. There is, so many wonderful incubators that are interested in bringing your business into their country and their particular market. So, it really goes back to, what James and Elaine and Helen has mentioned. But you do have to pound the pavement, ask for referrals, ask to be introduced. If you don't ask, you will not receive. You are the only person that's thinking about your company's best interests. You are your company's advocate. Choose every moment that you can to advocate. Get in front of panels like this. Get onto, source bottle or local media opportunities and just put your name forward. It's a slog. Having, started up with 3 companies myself, it's a blooming slog. But to make those connections, it's all got to come from you as a core, particularly if you're a founder. The other key thing is look at your employees, look at your team. I recently found out that one of my colleagues, her father was very senior in the government in Japan. Had no idea. It wasn't until we had a particular introduction that we needed, and we just asked the team, does anyone know anyone? Oh yeah, my dad happens to be this guy. We're like, oh, hello, let's get him in for a drink. But it is, an absolute slog. I'm sorry, I can't give you a shortcut method.
But those are really substantial and helpful answers, I think. And I think we know, all of us in this virtual room who are with us today, that there's a need to do relationship building, but what that means back over to Helen's point before as well is slightly different, or sometimes very different. And the magnitude of it, Tegan, it was just really helpful for you that when you quantified the hours you spend looking for connections, because what we're finding, I think, many of us who work and facilitate people's engagement across cultures, is that when we think we've done a bit of research and a bit of relationship building, we've done about 1/10 of what our counterparts may be doing in other markets in Asia. And back to that good point too about, competing. Great advice there from Helen, that we can compete by being the most culturally tuned in and capable. And so there's that one thing, that we can do, and it's made up of many small things that you do continuously. But I'm going to go around the panel and see what we can add on to that. So if I can go over back to you, James. What have you found works well working with the relationship building?
Yeah, so look, I think I probably just want to come at it because we're selling a product, we're selling an actual thing, we're selling wines and stuff like that. So slightly different to Tegan, who's generating business and relationships in a different way. We have quite a few of those relationships. So I suppose for me, it's how do you keep that energy, that interest, that excitement around what we're doing while we can't visit So really for me, it's acknowledging Zoom fatigue with our partners. Our partners, we say, oh, we want to do a webinar with you and talk about something. And we go, oh, aren't we great? Let's talk about it. But we know that they've been on a lot of different Zoom webinars and everyone loved it early on. So I think when we do a Zoom and when we do a webinar, we want to make sure we're very clear on what we want to present. We want to make sure that if we are bringing products to life, that we've made the effort to create some kind of good content. We've really kind of upped our kind of overall content game. We've really wanted to make things kind of keep people and bring them along on our journey of what we're doing with a company. So we've really started to do like little video pieces with the viticulturalist out in the vineyard saying, this is what's happening in the grapes. And you just send it to some of your import partners and just let them know that, the journey that's happening when they can't come out and visit. And then probably the main thing as well, I think, and this is probably more a practical one, is kind of information and assets while we can't be there to allow our partners to do their job easily. So we've developed an online portal where we really make that a one-stop shop for all of the back end, for everything to do with our brands and our products. We make sure we keep that really up to date and really easy to use. So those guys can just go out, keep selling our product and have all the tools that they need to be able to do that effectively at their fingertips. Well, that's in theory. It doesn't always work that seamlessly, but it sounds nice.
It definitely sounds useful. And I think I also know that everyone here appreciates that authenticity that everyone brings, that it isn't easy, that it isn't perfect. But those were fantastic pieces of advice. Thanks so much. And going around the virtual room, Helen, what would you like to add to that discussion?
Starting with this tech component, I know that WhatsApp, LinkedIn, very popular in Australia, but some in my market in Korea and also in Japan. For Korea, it's Kakao Talk. About 98%, if not 100% of the Koreans use Kakao Talk to conduct social and business discussions. And for Japan, I think similar thing for Line. So if you are already on those platforms, it'd be much easier for you to connect with new business leads in market. And also using Sydney as the multicultural international business hub that it is. For Korea, for example, about 60 corporates across various sectors are set up in Sydney with their Australian head offices. So using, I know Sydney currently can't really get around, but, while you can't travel into Korean market or Japanese market, connecting with those Australian headquarters for those businesses, introducing your product so they can actually have it in their hands or tested if it's technology, it'll make it easier for them to then understand your product and then report back to their actual headquarters, whether that's, Japan or Korea or in other markets. And then, going through those lines and also with Austrade's help, reaching into the right decision makers in market, I think that would be a great way to start doing business now while movements are quite limited. And another point too, I think, Tegan, you mentioned a great point about spending time on LinkedIn to connect with new contacts, whether that's commenting on different posts or messaging. I'm trying to do the same in Korean market where we're getting about 600 confirmed cases daily. So I'm having to open new Korean importer or Korean conglomerate contacts through virtual means. And what I found really helpful is using my Australian and Korean connections to get them to introduce me to new contacts that I actually want to reach into. And one example of doing that was going through an Australian lawyer, Minter Ellison, to get them to introduce me to another in-house general counsel in Coupang, which is the largest e-commerce platform in Korea, and then using that connection to reach into their head of global business. And so just using your existing connections to be introduced to your new business contacts, I think it's a great idea.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Helen. And I am going to ask Elaine if there's anything to add to that, and acknowledging that we have 3 minutes left. It'll be a short story, I think. But after that, we'll just go around the panel for this one tip that you would like to leave everyone with. And don't go away, everyone. We're just going to ask for 1 more minute of your time. So Elaine, what would you, if anything, like to add to this?
Yeah, I'll add very quickly to that. Look, I think what everyone said, it's all about engagement, really engagement with your channel. And for us, what has worked, I think to everyone's point, because I think Tegan touched on LinkedIn, we did virtual posts looking for virtual partners on LinkedIn, early stage in COVID lockdown, because we knew all our market had locked down. unbelievably successful at very little cost. So we thought, wow, that was fantastic. And then one of our markets started doing Instagram live interviews with universities and students, connecting them all. That was really successful. Our Nepalese market actually have started doing Facebook interviews and live as well. So I think all of those engagement, connectivity, I think to James's point, the webinars, people are exhausted from doing webinars, and we head back to back Zoom webinars all the time. This type of session is much better. The panel session, we have gone on to that now, where you can have, everyone can ask questions on chat, and it's a bit more casual. It's not as intimidating. So I think all of those work. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Big questions in a short amount of time, but we hope that it was insightful and, thought starters in a way for many of you. We also want to thank all of you for your excellent questions, and I acknowledge we didn't get to them all, and a special thank you to Kim for your questions. We will get back to you on some of those more specific ones. Very much appreciated the time you took. So now we know that, whatever your driver is for diversification, and there are many, we I guess get from this discussion here that it is that necessity of future-proofing and being sustainable in this fast-changing market. So what we'll do now, I know we don't have much time at all, is we'll just do like this last sentence from each of our panelists, and then I'll be able to thank everyone for the hour and a half that you've invested and spent, and a special thank you to our panelists. Tegan, that one thing that you want to leave people with?
Oh, show your passion. When you're enthusiastic and passionate about what you do, it's really contagious. And that's the easiest way to get someone talking about your narrative.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tegan. And James?
Yeah, I'll probably build on Tegan's point there. And I think if you really can understand, or feel proud about what your business means, what its reason for being is, and who you are, then that will translate well. And don't be afraid to have a go, because there is more risk when you go out into these markets, but the rewards can be there.
Brilliant. The last 30 seconds for Helen, and then Elaine.
I'll just say, get in touch with Austrade in Australia, and we'll be able to work out what we can do for you.
Thanks so much. And Elaine?
I think be able to communicate that passion. You can feel it and you can love it. And I think communicating it is in clear, easy, simple terms that every market will understand it. So it's really important to have that.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of our panels. Thanks to the City of Sydney, with whom we collaborate to put these events on. It was such a pleasure to hear from you all. And for all of you who have spent 90 minutes with us, if you could spend 1 or 2 more filling out the evaluation, we really appreciate it, because we do want to know how to best serve you. And we look forward to being in touch with you all. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.